And there's concern, too, about the slowdown in China. A further decline could dampen global growth up to 1% in 2022 and 2023. Well, Lorenzo Codogno is founder and chief economist at Lorenzo Codogno Macro Advisors. Good to see you again, Lorenzo. So I suppose we could say this is cautious optimism. The recovery is real, but there are considerable policy challenges, aren't there, for monetary officials?
That's correct. I think the outlook is still broadly unchanged, although we don't know exactly whether they have fully taken into account the recent new variant of the virus. However, the OECD highlights the risks and the imbalances. And certainly these imbalances are much more pronounced in the emerging market world, which can actually suffer significantly, and in some countries, also the sustainability of public debt might be challenged.
You mentioned there that these forecasts were largely made pre-Omicron, rocking the markets and confidence, but it's still top of the OECD's significant risks. So there's a lot of uncertainty, isn't there, about new variants and their potency and what the long-term implications could be.
Absolutely. And I think the OECD has, most other international organizations and central banks have underestimated the surge in inflation and also the duration of the inflation surge. So this time they take a very cautious approach. They continue to believe that this is temporary, transitory, which I fully subscribe. But they also say that central banks will need to carefully monitor the situation. And if in the spring of next year the situation has not improved, probably they need to take some actions. I think it's a balancing act, but I think it's a good balancing to some extent.
So a balancing act, but the OECD does say that central banks shouldn't panic. What do you think they should do then? I mean, sitting back and waiting to see till spring, is that going to be enough?
Well, they have to commit to a prompt reaction as soon as financial markets and economic agents perceive that the risk is real and kind of feeds into their expectations, into wage behavior and so forth. But so far, I would say the risk is definitely substantial in the US, but not in the rest of the world. So I think central banks should indeed wait longer and see whether the situation will be reabsorbed pretty soon.
Speaking of the rest of the world, let's talk about China, because that was one that the OECD highlighted, the drop in China's economy there being a concern. What impact could that have on the global economy?
Well, China is slowing. I think it's slowing also for structural reasons, not just the cyclical factors. But the OECD also takes the view that if there is a more substantial slowdown in China than currently expected, it could actually have a substantial impact for the rest of the world, which is not surprising. However, I would personally be more concerned about much smaller economies that have not the solidity, the economic solidity of China, but are at risk because of high level of debt. And in South America, there are many economies that are suffering right now. There are many African countries that are under pressure. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some defaults in the future. So I think in that case, the situation is really, really